Hello, Breach here from Transition Life Coaching, and it's been a little while since I've been on Instagram, so apologies for the bit of the absence. There has been quite a lot going on over here just in my personal life, and this Transition Life Coaching business project seems to be taking, I feel like I'm being carried in a lot of different directions with it. So there's been certain things. I know I was posting, I was trying to show some of the Osho Zen tarot cards and how they, some of the meanings of them, because I find that deck to be particularly interesting in the sense that it takes the traditional meanings of the cards and it gives them a little bit of a spin that really reveals a bit of their deeper meaning. And I feel like that particular deck shows how the cards are really used in a psychological sense. Because when it comes to tarot and reading tarot, this was a thought pattern that I had this morning. I do spend a lot of time in the morning with different thoughts running through my head. And this one was about, the one about tarot had to do with the fact that the reason that tarot works is because it has a lot to do with time and a lot to do with language, okay, and the way that we do things. So when it has to do with time, you get people who will reach out to you for a reading and they'll say, well, I want to know when I'm going to meet my next partner. I want to know when I'm going to get the next job. And these are all things that you can understand. When you're ready for something, you want to know when. I ask the question a lot. I'm not going to pretend that when I feel like there's going to be a big change coming, I want to know, when is this going to land? What's going to happen? But the reality is that the reason that tarot works is because we are working in a time space. We tend to think of it as past, present, and future because that's the way that we interpret time. We think of it as, the idea is, okay, what happened yesterday is past and what's coming tomorrow is the future and we don't know what that is and that's changeable. And yeah, I guess to a certain degree it is changeable. But time doesn't really, that's how we perceive time. We live in three dimensions, okay? We live in the dimensions of space and time, and so that's three dimensions of space and one dimension of time. That's generally how this is seen. And so that's the way that we interpret events. It's, we see things, we know what's in front of us. People who are very physicalist and materialist in the way that they approach things say, I believe what I can see in front of me, even though it's understood that your brain can play tricks on you and you can perceive things that are not really what they are and so on and so forth. We still have this thing that people still have this attitude of, I'll believe it when I see it, right? Especially if you happen to be an earth sign, Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn, or have strong influence of that in your chart, you're definitely going to be somebody who, show me the money, as I like to say. Show me, okay, that's great that this is happening, but show me the money. And really, truthfully, us earth signs tend to be the people who want that kind of information the most. But the thing is, when you predict a time, sometimes you can predict an exact time. Sometimes there have been times when I have done readings. I was thinking about some readings that I did last year regarding some changes that were coming up in terms of the work I was doing in person with people, and also certain changes regarding, I don't know, just certain people moving in and out of my life. And I had pulled cards, and when I said, well, when do we think this is going to shake out? I was getting cards that indicated like the beginning of Virgo. Like August 21st to 25th-ish, like beginning of Virgo. So I had, and weirdly enough, at that time, there was actually two different events that were going to be coming into fruition at that time, which I won't discuss here because some of them are just somewhat personal, but both of them actually happened exactly at that time in exactly the way that the card said. So, and at the time I was doing the readings, there's no way I could have known or seen that. So tarot can predict the future, but you also have to remember that the way that time seems to work, and this is something that occurs to me more and more, the more that I do this kind of work, and I have been doing this work for, I guess now it's going on, I started in 1987, so probably 37 years I have been doing readings, and what I've learned over that period of time is that time is it's almost like time all happens at the same time. You hear about these multidimensional, these timeline theories, right? The idea that we all exist on different timelines. And there seems to be some truth to that. Whether it works in exactly the way we think it does, I couldn't, tell you anything absolute on that. But we are definitely in a space where where our perception of time and what's coming. If I do a spread for you and I say, oh, okay, even if I do it for a particular time frame, like let's just say I said, like I'm doing readings, the readings will be coming out on April 8th for the 9th through the 22nd for those of the signs Aries through Virgo on my Liminal Tarot channel, which might be where you're watching this also. I mean, some people watching this live stream on Instagram, other people may choose to watch it over on YouTube. But either way, it's there. I can talk about that time period, but that doesn't necessarily mean everything in the reading is just going to be in that time period. Maybe it is, but it may also be pointing to a direction that something is going in beyond that. And the reality seems to be is that our future is happening at the same time as our past, as our present. That this arrow of time is just, this is a perceptual thing. This is the way that we perceive things. So, okay, from that perspective, tarot works because, in terms of telling you the future, because the future is really already happening, in a sense. Now, that said, we talk about the multiplicity of dimensions and timelines and things. So there is also the chance that things could change. It could be that the direction you're currently going in, or the circumstances, or the timeline that you're working in, that things are going to go a certain way. You could make different choices, and that could change. So if I tell you something, if you ask me and I say, well, the cards roughly say maybe 3 months. And if something else changes in that time frame, it could happen quicker, or it could happen farther off into the future. So timing is always a very difficult thing with that. But tarot works because it's working in a space that's outside of time, really. I find that in working with spirit guides as well. If you ask if spirit guides tell me something and I say, when are you telling me that this is going to happen? Sometimes I get a time frame, and over time I'm like, this is a really weird time frame. Like what they would say, if they say to me, oh, this will happen in a week could be 10 years. I mean, it's just very, very odd the way time works. So we should not, and we tend to be fixated on that. We tend to be fixated on what's tomorrow going to bring, and it's probably part of the reason that a lot of spiritual practices tell us to stay centered in the present, because the present is your point of power from which you can perceive or affect the past, present, or future. Okay, the other thing about tarot is language. Okay, the way that we come to knowledge, we have two types of language that we use. And one type of language that we use is words, like I'm communicating with you now. Actually what we think of as language. A series of words that are put together in a particular grammar and style, as our means of communicating, that we understand. I use these words, you understand what these words mean. And if you don't, then we often have translators between languages and things like that. So, and our whole way of dealing with, the whole way of rationalizing things, okay, the whole way that we try to understand what is truth, okay? Our standard for truth is usually scientific. And we talk about things being true that are based on objective data. Now, there's a problem with that right off. That's because there is really, yes, you can generate a data set that just is what it is. But the interpretation of that data will never be entirely objective. You have to have, you can look at data from a very emotionally distant, where you have no vested interest in what's being said or the outcome, which is probably what they call the most objective. But depending on the situation, sometimes that's not the best way to view the situation, or it doesn't really tell you anything of any value. Okay? We are often interpreting something in light of the impact that it has on us psychologically, the impact that it has emotionally. Some things have no impact on us at all. They go straight past us. Other things we take in because somehow they are reflecting something that is going on in our own psyche. So we have, so the idea of this language, and when we talk about the cards, and I have my little Aquarian deck here today, when we see certain cards and when we look at them, the symbolism of the cards is connected to symbolisms that have, I won't say, I want to be careful about saying that they're universal, but there is definitely a quality about them that there's enough commonality of a certain symbol within different cultures that we can read the cards, we read the symbol on that basis. Just like when we dream, you can talk about dreams and the meaning of dreams. And that interpretation can happen on multiple levels. Dream interpretation is a service that I also offer, by the way, for people who have complicated dreams or series of dreams. I do have, sometimes I actually will post those on this page. I will post the archetypal dream cards, which is one tool that I use. It's not the only tool I use to work on dream interpretation. But in psychology, we talk about dream interpretation, and we're not talking about Freudian, I'm talking more about Jungian dream interpretation that happens on a multiplicity of levels. Okay, there's the immediate impact of the dream. Okay, there's what the symbol says to you. So obviously your emotions surrounding it, your thoughts when you see whatever this is in the dream, whatever they are, even if they seem bizarre or absurd, factor into what the meaning is going to be of that symbol. For example, I'll give you an example. Last night, or the night before, no, it was the night before, I had a dream. I've been having tons of dreams, by the way. This is another reason I feel like I've been kind of out for the count on social media, because I've just been hit with all kinds of dreaming about all kinds of things that are both having to do with things going on in my personal life or my family life, and also things that have been going on in a broader spectrum, which is part of what I'm going to be talking about today. I know we advertised this as I'm going to be talking about the eclipses and stuff, but I am kind of working my way towards that information there. So dream symbols. Okay, the dream that I had was I kept seeing the name Lycurgus. And it's a name I'm familiar with because I am a professor of myth and religion. And Lycurgus actually is a reference to two different figures. There's actually a number of possible references. One is the military leader, the founder of Sparta in ancient Greece. That kind of very strict military civilization that we would see in Sparta. It does appear in movies and stuff from time to time, but the Spartan lifestyle was, the main king there was Lycurgus. Okay, so that's one possible nuance of Lycurgus. The other connects to the god Dionysus, and Lycurgus is one of the kings. There's Pentheus, Lycurgus. There's a few of them that reject Dionysus. They reject his divinity. Now, those of you who don't know, Dionysus is the god of wine. He's also connected with the Roman Bacchus, and that's where we get the term bacchanal. It's the idea of something that's like almost like a mad orgy or something that's frenzied. Though weirdly, Dionysus is a god. I mean, it seems paradoxical to us if you follow the history of it, and I have written extensively about the history of this. I've done presentations at Oxford, and I've had chapters in books, and I talk about it in my book, my academic book, Death and the Maiden. And I have 2 podcasts on it on my other podcast, Catonia Podcast. But Dionysus is, I've always seen as kind of a bridge figure. He was associated with the ancient mysteries. He's a god who's been around a long time, and his worship was one of the last things from the ancient, what we'll call pagan world, to go away in a Christianized Europe. Okay, that those particular cults lasted for a very, very long time. And Dionysus is the god that we connect with the term theos. Now, theos has to do, we think of like theology, or if we talk about somebody like a theocracy, a government that is basically, that is religiously ruled in some way. We associate the Greek prefix theos, Theos, with God and with the divine. But what that prefix literally means is a direct experience of the divine. Okay, so this is like the God possessing you or embodying you. That's what theos is. And this was a term originally connected to Dionysus. Because Dionysus, because he is the god of wine. So when you drink wine, you've heard the old expression, in vino veritas, right? In wine there is truth. And so when you drink wine, you become, you loosen up and everything. Something happens to you. There's a transformation. Now, we may have our modern say, oh yes, well, the wine does things, it dulls your senses. We feel that it dulls our senses, right? That it makes us make bad decisions. But alcohol is also something that loosens people up. It can be something and you have a room full of people who are very, very uptight, and then you introduce alcohol into the equation. Now, again, it depends on how you respond to alcohol. But for some people, this can loosen them up and make them less afraid to communicate or to be realistic about what they're doing and so forth. Okay, but in the Age of the Ancients, drinking wine was a way of directly experiencing the god himself, okay, the essence of the god. Because we're not talking, when we talk about gods in ancient, whether it's ancient Greece or anywhere, you're not talking about the modern conception of one god that has a personal interest in you. This is, the gods don't tend, they're forces, they don't tend to have personal interest in you. So Dionysus is the first one from whom you can personally embody an experience, okay? In a way, it's almost like the first type of mystical experience, which again, people will say, you know, and you hear about people even now using ayahuasca and different things to try to bring on certain kinds of spiritual experiences. So this is not necessarily a weird or alien concept with regard to this, okay? So we have, so you have this idea of that, and again, and by the way, I'm not suggesting that people should go out and do a lot of substances to have a spiritual experience. Generally speaking, those kinds of things are best, unless you have somebody who's experienced in those kinds of things who would guide you through that kind of experience. It's probably not the best way, but the reality is it is a way. Okay, and initially this was the understanding here. So you have this idea of the direct experience of the god and the direct communication of the god. So Lycurgus, this is where we were going with all this. Lycurgus was a king who decided that this was all disordered, rubbish, and he jailed the Maenads. He tried to drive, he would chase them around. He would drive them away with a goad. He's basically like, it's the same thing as Euripides' play called the Bacchae. It's like I'm driving out this Dionysus, because Dionysus was not taken seriously as a god by some people, and those who didn't paid the penalty very severely. And the penalty was usually madness. In the case of Pentheus in the Bacchae, his own mother becomes blinded by the wine and sees Pentheus when he is lured into coming to the Dionysus ritual. She sees him as this beast, and because she's in this frenzied state, she rips her own son to pieces. Okay? Like, Dionysus is very nasty when you don't accept him, okay, in these things. And I probably should not get into how Dionysus is the model for Jesus, because I think in any case, that's a much longer explanation, but actually, yes, Dionysus is at least one of the figures that connects in with the Jesus story, and the Jesus mythos, but I don't want to diverge into that right now. But the idea was that Dionysus was like a person who seemed like a regular person that people were following like he was a deity. And of course, he in fact was a deity. At least in some versions, he has a mortal mother and an immortal, and a god father, and a father who's a god, father who's Zeus, right? So we see the idea of this man who is a god incarnate, right? And people not taking them seriously as a god. You kind of get that idea. And Jesus does use a lot of Dionysus references. The turning water into wine at the wedding feast at Cana, saying, "I am the vine and you are the branches." I mean, there's a lot there. And people have written entire books on that. But certainly at that time, and of course in the early Roman Empire when Christianity became a thing, Bacchus worship was huge in the Roman Empire, as was Mithras worship. And all of those elements were picked up by Christianity as in its form that it developed into. So anyway, but the idea of Lycurgus here. So now we're thinking about this symbol of this king who was driven mad. In this case, he actually, I think, chopped his son up into pieces or something, like thinking his son was, again, not being able to see his son for what he really is, and ends up killing him, and then he ends up attacking his wife. Lycurgus basically goes crazy. But the name Lycurgus itself has to do with wolves. And it literally means wolf deed. And so now if I'm looking at this as a dream symbol, it's like, okay, are we talking about this strict Spartan military kind of Lycurgus? Are we talking about a Lycurgus who is refusing to accept that Dionysian energy, not giving it a proper place, and thus he is driven mad? Or, which is, by the way, why I talk a lot about unpredictable and chaotic energy and finding a place for it, because this is not something you want to exorcise or purge or purify yourself of. It's an energy that's there for a reason. And when you treat it as an evil that you have to avoid, it does, in fact, make things very, very difficult for you if you are kind of pushing this kind of energy away. So in terms of the dream symbolism, it's like, yeah, okay, so the dream symbol is this word Lycurgus. So it's like, okay, so what is that? What do all those mean? I mean, my first association when I woke up was like, that has to do with wolves. Like, am I thinking about werewolves? Am I thinking about, so what is the meaning of that symbol in the dream? Now, there was more to the dream that I probably won't get into here because it does involve people who I don't have their permission to talk about things. So, but it was definitely this idea of connecting in with, okay, so now I'm kind of it's what they call a process of amplification. You amplify the meaning of the dream, and you say, okay, here's all the possible meanings of this symbol, and what does it mean to me personally? What was my personal reaction to it? And also, what are the cultural and mythical things that are connected with it as well? And that was the way Carl Jung always did dream interpretation, was the idea that you expand the symbol, and as you blow up and explode that symbol, there's certain, some of the aspects may apply to your particular dream and some may not, but you might, when you start putting things together in context, you might start to see what the message is for you, what your body, what your inner voice, what your unconscious is actually trying to tell you. Not everybody believes it's a spiritual phenomenon in the sense of, oh, there's spirits talking to you, and that isn't necessarily the case. We have a very strong inner voice that talks to us, and we may connect that with outer guidance, and we may connect that with with just something that's going on internally. It could be it's the language of the body, but this is all going back to the idea of using tarot because it's something that's outside of the sphere of time. Time doesn't really have a meaning. I just do a recap here. Time doesn't have a meaning in that case, and again, the arrow of time is something that we perceive, but is not necessarily how things are, which is why sometimes you can do a tarot reading and see something that's going to happen. Okay. Now, symbolically, I was comparing this to language and dream symbolism. So when if I read from tarot, what I tend to be reading is, I know it. I've learned these cards. I've learned what the symbols mean. But even somebody who doesn't read tarot can look at the symbols on here, and oftentimes this is the way tarot is taught to people in classes. Is okay. So if you see this symbol, what is your impression of the symbol? What feeling do you get from it? What do you think this means? Okay, there's this person here holding two staves. Like, what does that mean? And oftentimes it's good to start with decks that do have very rich imagery on them, because because then you can get a real sense of what the card means. Okay, but this is used very heavily in psychological interpretations of tarot, because there is something about archetypal in terms of that unconscious content, the same kind of symbols that we see in dreams that allow us to try to figure out what their messages are. The same thing is true of the cards. And so if somebody is a client of mine, and that client more or less gives me permission to read them, and people can not give you permission to read them too. I've actually done another live stream on that, when people willfully shut you out. Whenever you hear about skeptics who come in with tarot and they're like, oh well, I brought this world famous psychic in, and I'm gonna basically prove that they're full of crap, because they're gonna try to read me and then they're gonna be wrong. But that's because you've already shut the door. It's like, as I've said, my analogy to that is, okay, you've hired me to do a service, you're paying me for a reading, and then when I show up to do the reading, you've basically locked the doors and pulled the shades and said, go away, and then complained later that I didn't do your reading, or my reading was wrong, or, well, because you... And I've learned now, the more readings I've done, particularly with my Way of Cartouche deck, which is the main one that I use, when I see Seth show up in the first position, especially if I'm doing a full spread, I'm like, okay, this person does not want me to see who they are. And that makes it very hard. You really want to hand the person's money back and say, bye, have a nice day, because you don't really want me to read you. The same is true of any other kind of energetic work. Same is true of Reiki work as well. because with Reiki, there's a lot of times I will get calls from people sometimes and say, hey, so-and-so's in the hospital and they're in a coma. Can you send Reiki to that person? And it's always dicey. Now, if it's a family member who's given me permission, then I will do it, but there's always, that person can reject it. I don't have a right as an energy worker to energetically move in on somebody else. I've decided you need this. Like, that's not for me to decide. And there have been cases, deathbed cases recently, where I have been called and somebody said, hey, so-and-so is on, they're in ICU, they're probably not going to make it. Can you send Reiki? And I've literally gotten aloud in my head, no. And it's literally coming from the person, like, no, stay away from me, leave me alone, I don't want it. And if that's the message, I'm not sending it, because I've been told very clearly that they don't want it from them. So it's something, when you come in and you make a Reiki appointment, then you have given your consent for me to, and again, it's not even my energy, it's just energy that's passing through me, but you still have a right to refuse it. When my father was dying, I was asked to go into his room and do Reiki for him. And it was really interesting because as I was doing Reiki on him, it was almost cold, but the entire room was like it was on fire. My sister walked in and she said, it's like 20 degrees warmer in here. But that's because he was refusing it. It was kind of bouncing all around the room because he wouldn't take it in. He didn't want it. He just wanted to die at that point. So it was, yeah, so it bottom line is that you can't, when it comes to that kind of work, you can't energetically, part of it has to be the connection with the client. The client has to come in, and as I've told people, it's not that you have to walk in and be wide-eyed and think, hang on every word that I say, okay? Because I'm just giving you the interpretation of the cards as I see them. And I feel that I use these in my coaching practice because turning over these cards, the symbols that reveal maybe where your obstacles are, or what may be leaving you undecided about a particular direction. And so if I turn a card over, like if I just randomly, I just opened up a card called the Seven of Rods. Now the Seven of Rods, I happen to know, is a card of defensiveness. Weirdly enough, that's a card of people criticizing you, and normally it shows a guy standing on a hillside with all these other people with staves kind of on the road underneath him. And you sort of have that image here, because you see this person like holding a thing against him, and then there's all these things here. And it's just basically like, you feel like other people are meddling in your business, and you're standing your ground, and no, I'm going to fight off the critics. I'm going to fight off that's that kind of a thing. But sometimes the point is, depending on other cards that show up with it, it might be saying, well, maybe that's what you're doing. Maybe you are putting up this defensive posture, and what you need to do is lay down your staves and move outside of that bubble. That can also be the message. So it deals very much with people's individual situations and circumstances. And so it's not so much about fortune telling and telling you, where you're going to meet a tall, dark, handsome stranger, or whatever the stereotypes are of that. So this is so just kind of talking more generally here, and again, just if you join later, I'm talking a little bit about what's been going on with me this month. I've been having tremendous dreaming going on, and I'm getting ready to kind of do some reworking of transition life coaching again, in terms of new directions that I feel, new spiritual work that I'm doing, and new directions that I need to go in. But I'm probably going to talk more about that towards the end of April, once we get past some of these strong astrological aspects. And that brings me to what I'm going to talk about now, which is tomorrow's solar eclipse. Now, the solar eclipse, you may be watching this, even if you're watching this on YouTube like next week or something, the eclipse's effects will last for about 6 months. Generally, whatever change the eclipse is going to bring astrologically, it doesn't happen on the same day usually. It can happen anytime in a 6-month period of time. Now, eclipses happen. Solar eclipses happen every year. We may see them, we may not see them. They may be visible in this part of the world. And so we have this eclipse that's coming, and of course the fact that it is visible in the United States, where I live in New Jersey, it's only going to be partially visible. I don't think we're going to see totality. And then of course, I think they're talking about possibly some clouds tomorrow afternoon, so who the heck knows. But maybe we'll see part of it, maybe we won't. If you do view it, remember, there's the special glasses that are like NASA approved with the right number on them and everything, so you don't burn your corneas. I don't know how much of a risk that is when you're not looking at full totality, but nonetheless, it's always good to be safe with that kind of a thing. If you're going to look at an eclipse, be safe. So eclipses, okay, astrologically, eclipses bring change, and they bring massive change. Now, one of the things that's happened in connection with this, just if you were in New Jersey yesterday, let's see, was it yesterday? Was it the day before? Well, anyway, we had an earthquake here in New Jersey. In fact, the epicenter of this earthquake, the first one, was exactly, let's see, it was between, I think they said it was between Lebanon, Califon, and White House Station. So that's, I do grocery shopping in Califon. It's just like right over the hill. It's right over there. And I just remember being here at 10:20. I was working on some writing up in my office, and then all of a sudden, like, the whole house just shook violently. It's funny, they'd been outside working on the road, which was also kind of a semi-miracle in of itself, but they were patching holes in my road. And so I thought, what the heck are they doing out there? They're just patching holes. They bring it, but I didn't know what was going on. And then it stopped, and I just thought, geez, I looked out the window and so I sat down again and got back to work. Then my mom pops up on my phone, and she's just like, hi, did your whole house just shake? And I was just like, oh, yeah, it did. She says, well, I called your sister, and I called my neighbor, and everybody had the same thing. So that's when I looked it up, and I said, oh, and it's actually close to being what they would call a moderate earthquake, which was a 4.8. 5 is considered to be moderate. So we're still technically on the minor scale. But generally, we have 3 fault lines in New Jersey. And apparently all 3 of them kind of went off. And I feel like it was about 10 years ago when I was at work. I remember standing in the computer lab of the library where I worked, and all of a sudden it was like everybody had sea legs. There was a shake. But it was a quick thing. I think it was in the 3 range somewhere, maybe high 3s. But it didn't, but it was just like one of those things, and everybody's kind of like, whoa, that was weird. And then people kind of moved on from there. But earthquakes are very rare in New Jersey, just because we're not the San Andreas fault, right? And interestingly, my sister used to live in California right on the San Andreas fault. Like, we would drive down the 14, and they'd be like, look, there it is. It looks like a mountain with a big, like, squiggly thing alongside. That's a major fault. So in California, you talk about a 4.8, they go, like she said, we never got out of bed for anything under a 6. It was just not even worth it. And in places like that, that's where you'll get a 6 or you'll get a 9 on the Richter scale. And those kinds of earthquakes do massive, massive damage. Now, this earthquake didn't seem to really do any damage, although I did have some people I used to work with post on Facebook that they were saying, they'd posted on Facebook, and it said that they were showing pictures where their walls actually had cracks in them the day after the earthquake. So some people, and for those of you from New Jersey who were watching, this was in Rockaway. So so some people did have damage, and maybe there's more than we know. It may just be something that we don't talk about very much, but but there were 2 earthquakes, actually. There was one, I remember I was working upstairs, and then apparently there was an aftershock in Bedminster, which is, the first one was around Tewksbury, the next one was in Bedminster, and then the 3rd earthquake that hit was in Gladstone, was the epicenter of that one. I couldn't help but to notice, but they were literally exactly to the east and west of Donald Trump's golf course. But I'm not going to get political here. It's just weird. It was just an odd thing that I noted, and it was so you have these earthquakes that happened, and that one was a 4, so that was far less. And I think I was sending somebody a WhatsApp message, and all of a sudden I was like, the whole house shook again, and I was like, whoop, there we go. And theoretically, we could have aftershocks to this all week. Now, okay, so what does this have to do with the eclipse? You're seeing a lot of people who are getting into this Book of Revelations kind of stuff. They're going, the Bible says that there's going to be an earthquake, and then there's going to be an eclipse. And as somebody pointed out, I was watching Bill of the Fifth Column this morning on YouTube. He very correctly pointed out eclipses and some kind of natural phenomenon like earthquakes or even, tidal waves, or, these kind of things, they go together. They go together enough that in Vedic astrology, generally it's assumed when you have a major solar eclipse that there's going to be some other kind of natural phenomenon. So Yeah, this is not something where, and also it's just very funny that there's a website called fark.com, FARK, and they would talk about the way in which media gets used and misused. I mean, they've been around, FARC's been around since maybe the 90s. I mean, it's been around for a long time. And I don't know if their website's still in existence, but I used to follow it on my feeds. And one of the things they had mentioned, because they actually had a book out, was that anything that happens like in New York is something that's major news. And it doesn't matter. I mean, the same thing could be happening in the Midwest or somewhere else. Somehow everybody only cares about New York. And maybe some other major cities as well, but particularly New York City. So, because the earthquake we had was not that major. There was no major structural damage, you know? I mean, yeah, the Statue of Liberty, and somebody said Statue of Liberty got hit by lightning, which I don't remember. Somebody had posted an image on X on that, and the date on it was April 2023, so I was like, really? Is that the same one? I mean, but a lot of people were commenting on it now as though this was the recent image, but I'm like, I think that's from last year. Somebody did say, though, that they thought lightning struck, and so people are putting all these interpretations into it. And yeah, okay, on the one hand, I'm saying, yes, sometimes signs in our environment tell us something, but they speak more to us personally. They could be telling you something global, but generally speaking, this idea that this is like the introduction to the apocalypse, the short answer is no, it's not the answer to any kind of end of the world scenario. That said, we are talking about a very, very powerful eclipse here. And in addition to the solar eclipse that's going to be happening tomorrow, we also have several other things going on. Mercury is retrograde. It went retrograde on the 1st of April, and those of you, especially any of you who have worked in technology, know that we live in dread fear of Mercury retrograde, because that was the time, like, you don't run system upgrades. Apple just sent me all these updates to my computer. I'm like, what, are you mad? Like, this is Mercury retrograde. You're not supposed to do that. But that's when, technology fails. Not a good time to buy technology. Communications can get messed up. So, and there's been quite a number of those. I had a client last week where all of a sudden Xfinity decided, now of course they're supposed to text me before they do work in my neighborhood, but nobody texted me, and all of a sudden the internet just went out for 2 hours. Right in the middle of the time for, you're saying, here come the 4 horsemen, yeah, right? It was the, and it went out literally a half an hour before. I was in the middle of grading exams for my students, and then it was like, okay, I have a tarot appointment with somebody at noon, and my internet was gone. As it turns out, my client, who was in Colorado, also told me that her internet was out. She's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I've been trying to get a hold of you. I have no internet. And I'm like, neither do I. It was really weird. We did manage to reschedule for the next day. But there was all of these kinds of communication glitches and problems, things that have been going down. And I'll find that sometimes I'll be in the middle of something that I'm determined to get done, and then all of a sudden everything just goes out, and I'm like, all right, whatever. I mean, I give up, But anyway, maybe because I have strong Gemini in my chart, that I think, Mercury. I have a lot of Mercury ruled stuff in my chart, so I think the retrograde tends to affect me very, very strongly. Every time, because it doesn't seem to matter. It doesn't matter what there are precautions you can take against retrograde. One of them that is probably little known is that if you get the Van oil, that's VAN, Van oil is good to put on. I put it on every day during Mercury retrograde, and that is something that while it doesn't guarantee you won't feel the effects of Mercury retrograde, it does. I find that it seems to have like some mitigating effect anyway. So just a little hot tip there if you believe in if you feel that astrology affects you. The other things that are coming up, in addition to the retrograde, we've got the eclipses. Of course, we had a lunar eclipse 2 weeks ago because eclipses come in pairs. And we also have, we've got Mars and Saturn in conjunction. Which is serious because Saturn can throw things at you, and Mars kind of is that courage you have to pull up to kind of push back at it. The eclipse itself tomorrow is going to be conjunct Chiron. Okay, Chiron is the wounded healer. It's an asteroid, and So Chiron has to do with your wounds. Chiron is currently in Aries, and this eclipse is going to be in Aries. So there's a lot of strong Mars energy around this eclipse, and that has the potential to be volatile. So we have to be very aware. We have to be careful. And then, with Mercury retrograde, with all the potentials for miscommunication, with all the obstacles that may already be coming into play, this can make for some really testy situations. But Chiron there also is a way of, it has a way of digging up and digging out truth, like bringing wounds back into your face, digging things up, material, not because it's trying to hurt you, but because this is stuff that these are transitional stuff now that you need to work on. A lot of it, ancestral, a lot of it seems to be ancestral, stuff coming up around family situations. Doesn't have to be. A lot of it may depend too on where the eclipse and the nodes and stuff fall in your own personal astrological chart. But there's a whole lot of, there's definitely massive shifts and change. Also, on the 20th of April, there's a little bit more positive news. You have Uranus and Jupiter conjunct. 20th of April too happens to be my birthday, but there's a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus, which is, to me, that indicates, okay, Uranus has been in Taurus for quite some time now, and Taurus, of course, being a very fixed kind of planet and very stable and steadfast. When Uranus comes in, it just messes everything up. I'm not going to repeat the story, but I've told the story to people many times of how I no longer work at the job I work at thanks to Uranus and Taurus. Eventually, I developed certain issues, like I said, which I still have. I still have great difficulty driving distances and going places because I can't get on highways anymore. My driving is very, very limited at this point. And a lot of it comes from, this kind of slap upside the head from Uranus and Taurus. At the point that astrologer April Shaley had told me was going to be, she says, watch out for this particular month in 2019, because, and I think it was around August, and that was literally when everything I had been, and I was trying to manage a major project at that time, everything just fell apart. Personally, professionally, everything just went, it was like somebody dropped a bomb on it. And so Uranus can have that effect on things. However, Uranus with Jupiter, I would feel like whatever is happening there, I feel like it's more of a good omen, because this can drop in unexpected opportunities. So if you are somebody who's not determined to stick to old patterns and do things the same old way, you may have an opportunity to really, really make big changes in your life. And if you are a person who is actually at a point where you want to, maybe you're in a rut, maybe you're tired of what you're doing, maybe you hate your job, maybe you hate something, there's something that you want to change, that to me is going to be that can bring shifts that are a golden opportunity for us to really move in the direction that we want to, because Uranus comes in and, nice little house of cards that you built and just knocks it straight over. It's a little bit like the energy of the tower in the tarot deck. Okay, when Uranus comes in, it's like the tower. It comes in and it just blows everything up, but it does it so that you can restructure based on truth. And with Chiron being involved in this very directly in this eclipse, there's a lot. I mean, this is just part of the reason that I have been laying low lately and just trying to work on finishing up projects, getting books out that I'm trying to get out, because many of you probably know, a lot of you cross-watch this channel with Chtonia, Chthhonia, which is my podcast. It's also my site. I do live streams every Monday from Instagram for Chtonia as well, so you might want to cross-check those. It's Chtonia Podcast, one word. That the work that I kind of do between these two is, I mean, it's I've been trying to finish up projects that I've had, rather than, I mean, I have all kinds of new ideas, and I have a whole new direction for this channel that's going to get probably more crossover with what I do in Chtonia over here, in terms of people dealing with people's transitions, dealing with people going through crisis, which is really the service that I offer here. Is trying to help people work through their transitions. I don't tell people how to work through their transitions in the sense of I'm not here to give you 3 steps to how to do it, but I we look at what's going on in your energy in your life. That's why I look at people's astrological charts. I do readings because I want to say what's happening here. Like what's the current stuff going on with you now? What's the backdrop that you're working against here? Thank you for being awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And so we can work from there. That's the way that I can take a step back and say, okay, and that way, because also as a spiritual coach, it's not my job to project my stuff onto you. Okay, my job is to find out, where we're here to talk about you and where you're at and what you're thinking, and so I find that, and I find is that I dig through things like that, people are very, very surprised at what they find. And I feel a lot of the crises that people are facing recently are, we learn to fear that because we fear death, we fear loss, we fear major change because we may be comfortable where we are. Or even if we're uncomfortable, there's the old expression, there's the devil you know. And it's better than the devil that you don't know. So you feel like, okay, I'm not totally thrilled with this, but at least I know it. And if I'm going to go complain about it every week, at least that's kind of part of my pattern and what I do. And I'm not criticizing people who do that. I had years of, sometimes you just have to cope with things and you get a sense of humor about it. I have been in job situations where, literally, I've written entire soap operas about, this was the way that I coped, right? Creatively. I would go and I would write things. And they might just be shared with a small group of people who found it hilarious because they could completely relate to it, and maybe sometimes they'd even add to it. So it was just a coping strategy when you really couldn't get out of, when you felt like you were stuck in a situation. And some people, they may be ripe for change, but see, these eclipses and things may create the conditions that allow that change to happen. But change is always scary. Change is always, some people, okay, let's be real. There are some people who can just roll right into change. They can come and go wherever the wind blows them, and they're fine. And I envy those people. I really do, because I'm an earth sign, and for me, it's very, very hard to manage change. I just even I know it. Again, it goes back to what I say about trying to approach everything from an analytical and mental perspective. Isn't good enough. I think a lot of what we're trying to learn now, especially as we move into this Aquarian future, is not just about AI. The danger of AI is that people are going to try to let AI take over everything that makes you human, everything that makes you creative and makes you contributing. You're gonna let AI, make all your music for you, write all your books for you, imitate all your actors for you. That to me is not a good use of AI, because you're basically handing the best part of your humanity over to a machine. And that's not, AI can have many, many good uses, but that, to me, that's why would you do that? There's nothing authentic about that. That sucks the emotion out of everything. It makes everything flat, the same, according to the same standard. You don't want to give up what makes you human. But what the Aquarian future can offer is finding different ways to do things. Where we're not stuck into this old idea of, I'm going to graduate from high school, then I'm going to graduate from college, and then I'm going to get a 9-to-5 job. It can explode the way we that kind of a thing. There's already a lot of people who are not following that paradigm. COVID definitely pushed us into the direction of not following that paradigm, right? When people were at home and realized, hey, you know what? Maybe this quality of life thing is good. Maybe I want to try to pursue this. But not everybody's in a position to do so. So I feel like, when these major changes come about, it pushes us towards this future. And when I think of the Aquarian future, I think of all of the things that, the way that we might expand our horizons and do things, because Aquarius is an air sign, so it's very, very intellectual, but it's also about what other tools we have. One of the things I always want to teach people is, what other tools do you have? Yes, you have a mind, you have reason, you have intelligence. I think it's good to dive deep, to develop your intelligence. That's all great. But you also have an intuition, you have gut feelings, you have emotions, you have you have other senses about you, senses that animals are much better at being developed with, because they're not saddled with an intellect. We treat the intellect like, oh, that makes us better than the animals. I'm like, not necessarily. Animals sometimes make better decisions because they're not so caught up in their head. Think about the times that you have been so indecisive and so stuck in your head and you can't move forward. You can't make a decision about anything because you're like, well, what if this could happen, but that could happen, but this could happen. And then you just tie yourself up in knots. And as a result, you never go anywhere, and you have an anxiety about every decision that you make because you feel that you have to get it exactly right. And yeah, that whole perfection ideal. Perfection is a word that comes from perficere. Perficere is a Latin word that means to finish. Okay, and so it's like we're always racing to be finished. I think about what Alan Watts says about dancing or listening to a piece of music. He said, the point of a piece of music is not to get to the end. It's not like the best, like he said, orchestras or bands or whatever are not the ones that play the fastest. I mean, you might like really fast music, but it's not, it's like, okay, who's gonna be the first one to get to the end of the piece? Like, that's not the point. And that's not where you want to go with it. When you're in the moment of a dance, you're in the dance. You're not thinking, about. The idea isn't like, okay, I'm going to dance as fast as I can so I can get to the end of it. Perficere indicates we're always trying to get to the end of it. We're always trying to get to the next thing, rather than being in the moment of what it is. And that includes dealing with things that are emotionally difficult for us. We always feel like we've got to push away from that and push past that and hurry up and get out of it. Somebody posted a graphic the other day that I thought was really great. It was about two different ways of dealing with human experience. And one had to do with a way that, unfortunately, I think the holistic, I don't like the term New Age. Maybe some of it is kind of that, but I don't like that term because it's saddled with a lot of baggage. But people who are more involved in what we might think of as spiritual or holistic, they have to watch out for this hierarchical way of thinking. One of the things that I stress is getting away from the hierarchy of thinking that way. Because it will say, well, these are high-level emotions and these are low-level emotions. And you must get rid of these low-level emotions and only focus on these high-level emotions. You should always have positive affirmations. You should always have, the whole law of attraction thing. And it's like, my problem with that is that when things don't go right in your life, well, what are you doing wrong? Why are you thinking about this the wrong way? It's not because you're thinking about this the wrong way. It's because you're having a life experience, and your life experience involves more than you walking around going, I'm so happy and positive all the time. And that's kind of the post. If people look at my webpage, which is going to be totally redesigned, by the way, but the front page, one of the things I want to talk about is like, it's okay to have negative experience. This particular graphic showed people hierarchically saying high-level emotion, low-level emotion. And then you have things like spiritual bypassing, where people just go, I'm just going to be positive all the time. You're going to do it to try to pretend because, somehow it's shameful for you to cry or to break down or to allow yourself to be depressed for a period of time. Like, that's no, that's bad. You have to get away from that as quickly as you possibly can. I mean, yeah, those emotions are not pleasant. Nobody wants to, in those situations, people obviously who are in clinical depression, yeah, obviously they do want to get out of that. That's a whole different level of things. But it's just, but yeah, it's not, But the thing is, our emotions, the way that they showed it in the second graphic is you need to view it as a circle rather than as a hierarchy. All of your emotions factor in, and they have a role to play. They have something to tell us about our lives, about what may be working, what may be not working. How many times, for instance, do we stay in jobs that we hate or do things that we don't like because we're saying, oh, well, yeah, but I make good money at this, and really this is the best thing for me. In the meantime, you develop all kinds of psychosomatic illnesses. People get terrible headaches. They get terrible stomach pains. They get, they have all of these things. Now, we can experience that kind of stuff just dealing with regular stresses of life, even if we're doing what we love to do. But it also, but sometimes too, it's a sign from our bodies, which we're taught not to listen to. We're gonna be strong. I'm gonna fight and I'm gonna overcome everything. I'm like, no, sometimes your body's trying to tell you something. And you would rather pay attention to it when it's just telling you little things rather than waiting till it starts telling you big things. Or when you have something big like a massive nervous breakdown or something. You don't want to get to that point. You want to listen to what's being said and say, okay, how do I need to adjust course? Or am I doing the thing that's best for me right now? And even if it's something you can't change immediately, you might want to think about, okay, well, what am I going to do to, what kind of actions can I take to get out of it? Or is this a situation that I have to sit with right now and, wait for the proper time for the right thing to come up? And how do I make the best use of this time in the meantime? Because part of this too is a bit alchemical. You want to be able to take what's the more negative aspects, I guess you could say, of our experience and turn them into something that's like alchemy. It's like you take crap basically and you turn it into gold. How do you do that? And again, there's not just one way to do it, and it's not going to be like, there's not one magical formula where suddenly everything in your life is going to become awesome all the time. Typically people who are coming to me for the kind of work that I do are people who aren't always having an awesome time, or just feel lost or feel indecisive or in doubt. And it's like, well, yeah, this is how working on how do we get through that? How do you work through this kind of energy? But really, in summary here, the eclipses and all of the kinds of things, and I probably haven't even talked about all the aspects. Those are some of the major ones that have gone on. The solar eclipse, the previous lunar eclipse that's happened, this Saturn-Mars square off that they have, or conjunction really, where you've got both of those elements coming in very, very strongly. You've got Chiron connecting with this solar eclipse. You've got Mercury retrograde. But you do have some more positive aspects in the second half of the month. And I believe, what's Mars? Mars, I think, is in Aries at the end of the month. I think that's another one. So we're talking about really volatile situation. We're talking about setting it all on fire, okay? And the earthquakes are, like I said, pretty normal thing that is connected with eclipses. And again, this one that everyone's making a big deal about is actually, again, my whole house shook with it. Both earthquakes, on yesterday or the day before, I'm losing track of time, and everyone's kind of like, it's a sign from God. It's this, it's that. It's not. It's really a minor earthquake. Very few. Some people did have some damage, but it was not like there were no big bridge collapses. There were no major catastrophes with loss of life. This was just. It was more like that was weird. It was more that kind of a thing, and yes, these things are typical enough before eclipses. Like I think I said earlier, that Vedic astrology even will tell you, some kind of natural phenomenon like that generally does occur in line with a solar eclipse. So, not weird at all that it's happened. Not a sign of the apocalypse. But nonetheless, from an astrological perspective, this is a really powerful thing. Oh, and the other thing was the electromagnetic storms that have been going on. It was a huge coronal mass injection. And while it's not really being talked about a whole lot, and because its interference, again, like with our Wi-Fi and with our systems and stuff, might be minimal right now, there are a lot of people, I've been hearing from a lot of people who can't sleep at night, who have just been, just can't get their head together, everything's messed up. You've got all of these kinds of very fiery influences going on all at the same time. And these have the potential to be very transformational for us on an individual level. So I think what I'm going to do is just for the end of this live stream, I'm going to pull just a few cards just to see. Nope. Let me come right out here. Okay. So our quick little reading for the people here. And obviously if you're watching this after, this is definitely in connection with the eclipse here. We have the King of Pentacles, the Four of Cups, and the Knight of Wands. Okay. So King of Pentacles is definitely energy about this is the culmination of the suit of Pentacles, which has to do with material success, business success. Generally, this is a card of doing well in business and things like that. So there's this. So this is somebody who has reached the apex of material comfort and satisfaction. Okay. So this, to me, this is very much a card of comfort. But with that card of comfort, we have the Four of Cups, which is the person looking at 3 cups here, right? And not seeing, and looking at them really kind of with a very dissatisfied kind of look. And not seeing the cup that's being held out here. Okay? So back to what this is literally like what I said earlier about, we may have something where we're very comfortable, and therefore we may be reluctant to look at the new opportunities that are being handed out towards us. And then we have this Knight of Rods, though. So this is that very strong fiery energy. This wand energy is fire energy. Knight of Rods is somebody. The knights are the ones that come rushing in. They bring messages. They move fast. It can literally have to do with moving, traveling, and relocating. Okay. But to me, the Knight of Rods after this may indicate that, oftentimes the Knight of Rods is kind of a warning against acting too quickly, like look before you leap is really the message of the Knight of Wands. But I feel like things are going to start to move very, very fast after this eclipse. Like this energy of kind of being in the same place, maybe we're bored, maybe we're ready for a change, maybe we're not seeing opportunities. It's just kind of like sudden movement. All of a sudden, things are just going to start to move. So this is the message that I have from here about what this eclipse is and what this eclipse is going to do. My only caveat with that, with the Knight of Wands, is that you want to make sure that whatever you jump into that's new, and maybe you're going to be in a situation where being spontaneous is the right thing to do. Go with your gut, okay? That's the thing we're taught not to do. We're taught to analyze the crap out of it. Go with your gut. But do remember that we are in a time frame where maybe we don't have all the information, or maybe not everything presenting itself is exactly right. So it might be just a good time to start laying your plan out. And then once we get to the later half of April, that might be a good time to launch. Because prior to April 25th, there's ways that things could be miscommunicated. You could have people return from the past who maybe come back and seem to offer you something, but it may not be where you want to go, because the idea is you're not going back. You're not going, here we are talking about the arrow of time, right? But you're not repeating something from the past. It's like now you're being called to do something new. So you want to be moving in that direction. And I think that, with this kind of energy, so after April 24th too, when the retrograde's over, when miscommunications, when that lack of clarity, and the initial cloud that we might have that can come with an eclipse. Because eclipse is also, it usually shows up as a card of revolution in my astrology deck. It's like you could have truths coming out very, very suddenly. I think I said in the very beginning of this live stream, if people were not quite on right away, that this is a time when truths come out, stuff gets dug up. There's a lot that seems to be around ancestry and family here, so that might be the case for a lot of people. Again, depending on where this is falling in your chart. It could have to do with, mine I think is falling somewhere between the 10th and 11th houses, so this could have something to do with my career, could have something to do with friendships or people in my network. Maybe there's going to be things I find out that I'm not expecting. All of this is here, but all of it's here to, all of it's happening to kind of scramble things up and shake things up so that they come out a different way, and the way that they come out is something that gives you a lot more possibility and opportunity for the future. So, so here I am telling you from Transition Life Coaching not to shy away from change. Obviously, people who are interested in doing coaching or any of that stuff with me, I do have the links in my bio on Instagram, and if you're watching this on YouTube, I usually have the links down there as well. So, of course, I'm always willing to work with people. I've changed it up a little bit because I used to require that I always have the life assessment done first, but a lot of people just said, hey, I don't have the upfront money for the life assessment, so I say, fine, if we just need to do one-on-one coaching, that's fine. I can do that. Or if people just want to pop in and have a reading, or if they want to have Reiki sessions via distance, or if they happen to live close to me, I do it in my house here as well, which you would contact me separately for that. But just wanted to share some of that with you and some of the insights on the eclipse. So general summary is here is, no, the world's not ending, but there are big changes coming. And, my advice would be, make the most of these changes, pay attention to what's going on, but also look before you leap. Make sure you have all the information before you initiate a major change. So, and you're welcome. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you. You're definitely very welcome. And hopefully I can start doing a few more of these live streams, but hopefully you tuned in. This is something that's useful to you, or, this happens to be for you. So with that, I wish you a safe and happy week, a very safe eclipse season, and I'll see you next time.